Hi, and welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship.
Hey, welcome back to the Love How Deep podcast. We're so excited that you're joining us again, and I am really thrilled about this episode because we're going to be talking about parenting, and it's something that we don't really talk about a whole lot on the podcast. I don't think we've devoted a full episode to it.
Not
We
too
had
much.
some conversations
Not too much.
about it. So, this is one area that I think you and I tended to struggle a little bit.
We did.
In our marriage. And that's why we're bringing a guest on today. So we need to have somebody else talk about this, but it's going to be a little bit more specialized because we're going to be talking about parenting special needs children. And we've got lots of friends that have children that have some needs, and it's not easy dealing with that. So,
Right. I think it's parenting in a little bit of a different way,
Yeah. And so with that, we want to introduce Brandon Summitt. Brandon, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We are. We're really thrilled that you're here. And I think you're going to offer a lot of insight, and you're going to educate the people that are watching, and then you're also going to educate us as well. And so, but I'll say a little bit about you. And I love, in your bio, you talk about being married for 12 years, or I guess it's coming up pretty soon. And then you have an 11-year-old son. And so putting that on your bio first just tells me that that's probably the most important thing to you. So I think that's awesome.
Good.
You're an ordained bishop. You've been active in the ministry since really you became an adult. You served as a youth pastor for 7 years. You're pursuing a master's in theology with hopes of becoming a professor. And I'm really getting tired just thinking about all these things that you're doing.
How are you doing all this?
Right.
Yeah.
You love to listen to audiobooks, collect books, treasure hunting. And I love this one. You say you like to obsessively think about how you could word things differently in a conversation, which we might need to have you back on and talk a little bit about communication, right? Because that's something that we talk a lot about.
We do.
And then you also host your own podcast called the Charting Life Podcast. And it's where you talk about life's mysteries through conversations and stories. And so, and there's all kinds of different things that you enjoy talking about. But again, the one thing that we wanted to talk to you about was parenting of special needs children. So did I get that right? Anything I missed? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it all.
Okay. Well, awesome.
job.
So, yeah. So, I don't know if I'm throwing you a curveball with this one. We'll just get started. But I kind of often wondered, what does special needs mean? I mean, I guess there's probably different aspects to what a special needs child is. What's involved in that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So special needs is a really big umbrella. That could be anything from, mobility issues or health issues. So you think of a child with cancer has special needs.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when we say special needs, we're probably thinking about somebody who has some kind of a cognitive or developmental disability or a delay, something of that nature. And so whenever we're in the conversation about special needs, again, there's a wide range of, issues that could be. And so there's going to be some challenges unique to each, I guess you could say, category. And probably one other thing I want to say that probably helps, I guess, set the tone in the conversation is it can be very emotionally charged having the conversation or even, talking about special needs at all. And a lot of people have very specific ways they like to talk about it. Some would say people first. So like a child, my child who has autism. So they put the child as the emphasis first, or others would say it the reverse, an autistic child. And, really it's the same heart behind each method, but it's just your preference of how you go about it. And, we might use, some prefer special needs, some say prefer disabilities or challenges. So as a general blanket rule, whenever I have any kind of conversation like this, I just kind of like to say, the intention as well. I don't mean to offend somebody. If I say use one word or another, I might use them interchangeably.
Yeah.
But just, I try to give the charitable, understanding, and I mean it in a charitable way.
Yes. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And so, with what we're going to converse about today, we probably will focus a little bit more on the relationship between husband and wife when it comes to parenting. But at the same time, I think we're going to talk a lot about, the parenting of the child and how the child's doing, and maybe the interactions with siblings and things like that too. But I guess really the first question, would be, how do a husband and wife make sure that they stay connected? Because it can be very demanding. I know.
Yeah.
I can think of an example of a special needs child in our church that's in a wheelchair and basically can't do really much of anything
Right.
on his own. And so just again, all the work that needs to go into that and how that can just really kind of, I would imagine, cause a couple to potentially drift. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to stay connected through all of that.
Sure. And one of the last things you mentioned was that it can cause a couple to drift. And unfortunately, there's too many stories of parents who have ended up divorcing or splitting after the child it becomes an adult, or either dependent enough or in an independent or a dependent facility, because they spent their entire time and the only part of their identity was their child. And they've just
Oh,
kind of
that's so
lost
true.
themselves along the way. And now that, the significant thing that they were doing with their child is, and they've been spending 15 or 20 years not even knowing each other anymore. So the big thing, I would almost think back to my basketball coach and say, keep the fundamentals. So when you're dating, you might try to, I've heard it said this way, like you're stealing away a minute or two here to text. I would text my, you know, my girlfriend at the time, and now my wife, I would text her here, here or there, or I would call her when I could. Um, this is just an interesting part of the story, but we worked different shifts when we were engaged, and we had about 10 or 15 minutes that we would have, and it would just make sense just to go home. But we didn't. We would have our 10 to 15 minute date just sit on the couch, pretty much. But it's that kind of thing that you need to do, is to just be intentional about every little moment that you can.
Mm.
And, there are times when my child is calm enough and we're like, we're going to just go and spend a couple minutes in the bedroom, let him, chill. And we're just going to talk for a few minutes, or just, whatever it may be. We're going to, just take those few minutes together and really be intentional about that.
Yeah, as you were talking, for some reason, the word intentional just really came up for me. Because the longer that you're together and you're dealing with, the difficulties of this, you can kind of take things for granted, or maybe just try to focus on just the urgency of what's going on around you, and then kind of losing sight of your spouse. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because when you are, parenting a special needs child, you don't have much of a calendar anymore. That, almost everything you do does revolve around making sure your child's taken care of, because you love your child and you don't want them to,
Yes.
to go through extra challenges they don't need to. You want to make sure that everything is taken care of. And because it does take extra care and need, again, you have, we would call things game time decisions. So our church has been very, understanding, even with me being on staff, where my wife may not be able to come all the time because our son's having a really rough day or whatever the case is. And so, any plan that we made, it was, keep us in the loop, keep us invited, but understand that an hour before we might say we just can't make it. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so when you're in that kind of a situation, you just kind of have to go with the flow.
Mhm. That's right.
That has to be very disheartening to know that you're making plans, but yet you know that you're probably going to end up canceling because. And I mean, just
Right.
the emotions that go with that, of like, why does this have to be my life? Why can't it be that? Why me? Like, you could just go down this rabbit hole of negativity and just really cause a rift between the two of you. But yeah, but being intentional and saying, yes, this is my life. This is, we're going to make the most of it, and trying to put that positive spin on it, looking for the good things. It sounds like that's what you have to do, knowing, yep, we're going to make plans, but we know we might not be able to go follow through.
Mhm.
There's always the next time, and really trying to stay as positive as you can, knowing that God has given you this child, God has given you this
Mhm.
spouse, and you're going to work through it together as a team. It's a lot.
Yeah. Humor helps a lot. We just, and that's like, maybe a response that I've learned even early on in life is, if you can just crack a quick joke, kind of make it a little bit light, add some levity to it.
Yeah.
That definitely takes the sting of something that doesn't eliminate the pressure, but it takes the sting of it away enough to be able
Sure.
to, handle the situation, or to be able to accept, what you have.
Right.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that works most of the time, I think, for you and I. Like, you might come to me and say, you know what, you didn't make the bed this morning, honey. And if you do it with kind of a smile and kind of a tilt of your head and, the tone and the body language,
That
maybe
goes
be
a
a little
long
bit more
way.
gentle, that can
Yeah.
definitely help. So,
Like when he came downstairs, he went upstairs twice last night to go get one thing. Both times he came down, he didn't have it, but he had something else. I was like, so did you get that paper? He's like, oh man, runs back upstairs. He comes back down. Did you get the paper? So rather than like nagging at him, it's like, let's just
have some fun.
laugh about it and be like,
Right.
we've all been there,
Yeah.
That sounds like me a lot.
And we know you can't be perfect. I mean, we get it when you're stressed and stuff just kind of rolls out the tongue or whatever, you get upset. It can happen, but as much as you can, like you said, I think that's great to bring a little levity, a little lightness, a little humor to the situation.
That's
So,
good.
yeah.
Good word. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about other children in the family, because we have some situations of some friends and family members that maybe have one special needs child and then one or two or three, whatever, that my guests are not special needs. And so, there can be a difficulty in making sure you're spending time with the others because you've got a lot going on with the special needs. And then also, is there jealousy between children? And I don't know if you have any kind of wisdom on that in that area.
Good question.
Sure. So for my wife and I, we only have just our one child. So from personal experience, I may not be able to say a lot to that, but I think there's still some principles that would work into play. Probably in the same way which you would stay connected with your spouse by having these moments that you can, is with your children. It may not always be glamorous and fun, but the children who aren't special needs, take them on an errand. Like, hey, we're gonna go grocery shopping. You come with me. That sort of thing, where you're still making sure you have that time with them. And if you don't have as much extra time as you would for, if you had no special needs children, because again, that's going to significantly limit your time. Take the time that you do have, and so you can be able to do that. And so that's probably one of the best things I can say is, because my wife and I have talked about that, is like, if we have another child, how is that going to be? Is one going to feel favored and the other not? And so, my best advice, from, granted, not being in that situation, but the principle or mindset that I would take going into that would be just to add them into every little thing that you can do, because they may not have that physical need or mental need, but they still have a spiritual and emotional need that you need to parent with that as well. So, but it'd be a juggling act, It
Right.
takes practice and forgiveness, and it can get you grace and mercy with one another. So as you grow as a family, that's something that can certainly help smooth out the rough edges.
Right. That makes sense because, I mean, even with a family with with children with no special need, you have to take your spouse on a date and you have to take the children on a date, one-on-one. Let's just go spend time together. And yeah, when you've got that added layer, it's even more important, I think, to pour that love and affection and quality time into those other children, to let them know that, yeah, I'm caring for them for this reason in this way, but it doesn't mean that I don't love you. So that's really good too. It's just, I think it's even more important to pour that love into them. Yeah.
Right.
For that.
Yeah. And then I'm just thinking too, I mean, for people that are watching that maybe don't have special needs children, maybe they've got 2 or 3 kids, you can probably relate to this, because if you have kids at different age ranges, you got a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and then a baby comes along. I mean, it's kind of the same concept. But probably, as you as parents are probably going to tend to gravitate toward spending more time with the baby and making sure the baby's needs are taken care of.
They're
And
totally
so,
helpless. They need more time and
Yeah.
attention.
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that can happen.
That's good.
What about, we were also thinking about, faith in God, and we could see that could be shaken with a couple that maybe sometimes even in the womb, when you find out that something's not right, or again, after they're born or whatever, kind of maybe getting angry at God, or I don't know if you've seen that or have any thoughts on that, Brandon?
Yeah. So it definitely is something that can be a trial and test for your faith. And maybe I could share 2 stories to kind of help create a picture there, for something with my wife and myself. So I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have been since I was 8 years old. And I know different people have different Christian, traditions. I grew up Pentecostal, and I've seen God do some incredible miracles. People who, it's like an unexplainable miracle where somebody was healed. And I've prayed for people, and they've been healed and it's amazing. But that was very ironic because I've been diabetic my whole life. And I've had people, for whether it's good intention or whatever, to say, God's going to heal you one day, young man. And, and I've always like, okay, it's just going to happen. And as time went on, and I would go to the altar and pray, or I'd disconnect my insulin pump and leave it, and then have to go back a few hours later because my sugar is really high, and just that can really, weigh you down. But I went to a Baptist school, and one chapel, a preacher mentioned something on the in Daniel, the 3 Hebrew boys getting tossed into the fiery furnace. And I always thought it was super cool that Jesus was with them and everything. But their response was amazing, is, God will save us, but if he doesn't, we still will not bow. And that's something that's stuck with me for probably 20 years now. And I remember around the time that my son was diagnosed with autism, we were starting to have realizing there was delays and no communication with him. It was getting, struggling. But I had a point where I was at church, I was worshiping, we were in worship and everything. And I just felt the Lord speak to me that if I never heal you in this life, will you still love me and serve me? And instantly I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I've been a Christian. I'm on staff at the church, of course. But those are one of those things that as you get older, you start to realize that you do need to actually sit and think about the answer. Even if it is going to be yes, you still need to count the cost and process that. And so then I did. I was like, really, there's no other option for me. But even if there were, yes, and, I don't love God and serve God because he could heal me. I mean, he's God, he has the power to do whatever he wants. But, even if, that healing is in heaven one day, I'm still going to serve God. And that helped shift my mind significantly for even going in with our son. There was not too long ago, actually, my son, he's learned to, when he has these stresses and anxieties that really lock him up, he has to go through some sort of a process. And one of the things he's done is started praying, and that's great. But sometimes it's also very scripted, and it's like, okay, it's a little difficult there. But, we've kind of, every time you need to pray, we're going to pray, pray with you. And, I might have to say the exact same words every single time to help you have that comfort, but maybe in my mind, I might add a few more. But there was a point where, again, I felt the Lord say, pray for strength, because I just want God, to fix. So I think most people do. We want to go, we just want the mountain to move, but God wants to take us through it most of the time to give us that strength. And, but I felt the Lord asked me to pray for strength. And at first I'm like, I really don't want to pray for strength, because I know what this means. You don't need the strength if you don't need to, carry the burden. And, so again, it was one of those moments where it's like, I think I'm going to say yes, but I need to count that cost in order to, that way my yes is actually, sincere. And it was the next day, the same thing. I was like, all right, Lord, please just give us strength. And that was a significant breakthrough moment for me. Because we were really struggling. There's ups and downs, and again, we were just really struggling for a while. It was like there seems to be no hope. We're kind of in a spin here, and that was a significant, again, assistance that what God has helped me get by giving us strength to be able to go through and to have that peace.
Yeah, that's so good. I know you had we're talking about this the other day about how when we become Christians, a lot of us think, okay, now we're all set and we're not going to go through struggles and trials. And
It's not true.
That's not what God's word says.
It's not true.
He says
When
lead
you
us.
face,
Yeah.
when you face
Yeah.
trials.
Yeah. He won't
Well,
leave us or forsake us, but yeah.
Right. Well, that kind of reminds me, since I was, I wasn't sure exactly how I might lean into this today, but, C.S. Lewis writes about the problem of pain at one point. C.S. Lewis is just a fantastic author, but, he mentioned something, if I can get the quote as close or correct as possible, is that God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks to us in our conscience, and he shouts at us in our pain.
Oh.
And the solution to pain, because if God's so good, why is there pain? Why is there suffering in the world? And, it's not just this cutesy answer that, okay, well, in heaven, things are going to be perfect. In heaven, they will be great. No more tears and all the healing and all the wonderful things are going to happen. But, the solution in this life that we have is we have a God who entered into our pain. That, the word became flesh. And when Jesus came on the scene, he experienced the fullness of life. Yeah. And, if you're in Christ, you cannot say that I'm totally alone. Not really. Because you don't have, even though you may be the only one who feels your pain, that you know of, Christ has felt your pain. And there is a great deal of comfort in knowing that there is somebody alongside of you. It's ideally if we have somebody we know, like your spouse, which, we should be able to play into that. But if nothing else, you know that Christ is with you and he knows your pain, not just philosophically, but experientially too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. Couldn't have said that better myself. And so, I was thinking too, as you're talking about, um, having that special needs child with an issue, and it's like maybe trying to get away so much from like, this has to be healed, this has to be taken care of. We can't move forward unless this is, something's done about this. And not that you don't want to stop praying about it or hoping, but at the same time, realizing and recognizing that it's here and what can we do with it and how can we make the best of this, and
Yeah.
how can we just be emotionally present for our children and give them the best experiences that they can have, and so yeah.
I think of just not my will, but thy will be
Mm.
done. And can you align your will with God's will, no matter what that looks like, and accept that? And so when he blesses you with a child that's not what you thought it would be, are you mad at God, or do you say, God, help me with it? Give me the strength, give me the peace, like you're talking. And then, because God's will is for you to parent that child with
Mhm.
everything that you have. And so you want to do that. You want to parent that child no matter
Mhm.
no matter what kind of child you have. You want to parent them the best way that you can. And God's going to give you what you need in every situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would say for anyone who's listening, if you know somebody who, they have their family with special needs, it's tough sometimes because these little short, pithy saying bumper sticker slogans that we have might be completely accurate. God wouldn't give you this child with his needs if he, if you couldn't handle it. Or, this might be, God's way of having you stay, stay in contact with him and continue to pray. These things might be well and true, but hearing it as a parent can be pretty rough.
Right.
I think my mom's response when because I was 8 years old when I was diagnosed with diabetes, and somebody said that to my mom, and she's like, "Well, God doesn't know how strong I am. He was that thing much more of me than I really am." But again, you feel that, and it's like, man, that's even though it's true, it doesn't help. And that's not to say that you can't have conversations or you can't try to encourage one another, but sometimes I guess it's just something to be conscious of. Is sometimes those things that you mean so well. And so for me and my wife, like we know that someone means well, and maybe it takes a while to realize that it might be true, but in the moment it's like, okay, yeah, that's nice, but
That's not what I need
doesn't
to
help.
hear in this moment. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I was diagnosed with cancer 20 years ago, I was told all of those things, and
Mhm.
I was even told I wasn't believing enough or praying enough. That's why God didn't
Yep.
heal me miraculously. Like I heard all of that, and I heard the good things that people said to me. But is that what I wanted in that moment? No, I wanted to have my pity party and cry and
Yeah.
scream and God, why me?
Yeah.
I got up off the floor, and eventually those things sunk in. But yeah, we do have to be careful that
Yeah.
about the things that we say to people with issues, with special needs
Right.
children, things like that. That we just love and support them.
Yeah.
And so, what do you need?
Absolutely.
What do you need? Do you need a night off? Do you need me to pick up
Mhm.
something for you? Like, I think those are things we can do for them.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was yesterday I was listening to the radio and I heard a pastor say something along the lines of like, the tougher the situation, the fewer words that you should be speaking to the person that you're with. So, when it's like, if it's something like a death or, something like that,
Mhm.
almost just your presence. And he talked about how, I think it was in Job, where his friends came along and they just like sat with him, I think for
They
7 days,
with them.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that initial stage, it was like they didn't really say anything. They just sat and mourned with him. So
And what else
again, I
can they
don't know if
say?
that really applies here. Maybe it does, but
Well, and I would say back, for a few moments ago, we were saying that, the special thing about Christianity is we have a God who entered into our pain,
Yeah.
that presence. And so obviously it's great that God does it, but it's also special when God uses other people to help be with us in that moment. And
mm,
in every, situation's going to has its own unique, fingerprint. But,
Yes.
but if you know, if you know that couple, then you might have a better sense of, hey, just, hey, we love you. We're praying for you. We see, I know you probably struggle, so much and see, there's so much that we don't see. Um, But from what I do see, I think you guys are doing a great job. So we've had people in our church who's said that, it's like, yeah, we know that he has, there's some struggles there, and we usually only see one side of it. At home, there's going to be so much more that we don't see. But the parts that we do see seems great, and we're praying for you guys.
Yeah.
So that's always been encouraging.
That's really good.
Yeah. And I guess as we've been talking, it kind of leads into our next question that we wanted to ask you a little bit about community support and, what's kind of what are some of the best ways that couples can make sure that they're staying connected, either with family and friends or with other community resources? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Brandon.
Yeah. So I would say there's a number of different things. For one, whatever the particular special needs that you're dealing with, that you're trying to, to help with, you can look online. Social media can be a good thing, but it can also be a double-edged sword. A lot of community or parent groups that we've seen, some are very helpful, but some of them devolve pretty quickly into complaining about their situation or their child, and that's just not helpful for anyone.
Yes.
So I would say if you do try to find some support, or at least some information, some resources that way, just keep an eye on what that is. And by human nature, it's easy to get sucked into that, even if you are saying positive, And so I would say, if you can approach it maturely and you have nothing, that can be a good starting point. But churches are great. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a mega church, but typically larger churches, there might be a few hundred or more people, are probably going to have more resources, because statistically speaking, they're going to have more families in their church, probably with some kind of special needs. So I'm not saying a church of 30 or 40 can't do it, but statistically speaking, it's going to be some of the more larger churches. They're going to have more resources. And so one church that is actually pretty near us is Little Flock Baptist Church, and here in the Louisville, Kentucky area, they have or at least at one point they had a respite program, and I forget how frequent it was. It was like once or twice a month, like on a Tuesday night, and you could drop your kid off for about, I think it was like 2 hours, something of that nature. It's not a long time, but it's enough for, husband and wife to get away. Or I think my wife, we just like went through a drive-through and just parked our car for a little while and just kind of decompressed or talked, and was able to have our own little date night.
Yeah.
In that way.
So
and so that was wonderful. And again, with it being a bit of a larger church, they were able to kind of help, put kids in certain areas based off of their needs or abilities. And they did something, I think it was really good too. They had kind of a buddy system where it was like 1-on-1 or 1-on-2, because with special needs, you need to specialize kind of with that person. So they had it really well and set up. And so if you are a Christian and you do go to church and your church doesn't have anything, try reaching out to some of the larger churches and saying, hey, this is our situation. Do you guys have any resources, or do you know of any place? And be able to get some connections that way. And maybe your pastor might have some idea of some of the other churches in your area that can be able to help with that.
Sure.
Yeah. That's an awesome idea. I love that. And it's funny, coincidentally, the church you're referring to is where Heather's sister is employed. And so we did not know that until
that's really cool.
Started talking before the episode.
Yeah.
So basically,
but what they do have, we know what they do have is that there's a special needs Sunday school class. So the children have a place to go and get, the love of Jesus poured into them through the crafts that they make, or, the lessons that they're learning. Like they even have that during vacation Bible school. They have that same thing going on for those kids. And so my niece gets to participate in that way, and they might dress up like Mary and Joseph at Christmas time, or put on costumes, or make little paper dolls, and just like reenact these stories to just get Jesus in them. And I love that they do that, because to some level it's helping them. It's helping their understanding. It's giving them a place to be themselves, whatever that looks like, whatever that means. I love that their church does that. So, if you're looking for a church, look for things like that. If you have special needs,
And I would say also talk with whoever is over the children or youth, or whoever, whatever your children are. That might be something. So for now, pretty much Sunday and Wednesday, my wife is back with, my son. Not that she's trying to be a children's ministry worker, but she is the main person for our son, because he's just very comfortable with her. But there was a point a few years ago, my son, he loves flipping light switches. And at least at one point, one of the doctors said that's kind of a comfort thing. Like I feel out of control, so I'm doing something I can't control. And he would start strobing the lights by turning it on and off, on and off. And so obviously you can't really have that in the middle of children's church or the grocery store or wherever. But um, one of the other staff of the church, who was the children's pastor at the time, he just used, it was so simple but so profound. He just simply gave my son the responsibility to turn the lights on and off before and afterwards. And so then that's another thing that kind of goes in with special needs. It doesn't mean they can't do anything. You make sure that they have, like, having some responsibility. It gives you so much dignity. And so that, giving my son, he was probably 4 or 5 at the time, maybe about 5 years old, and just giving him that respect and dignity of, hey, this is your job. And he absolutely loved it. And it also turned down him flipping the light switch and somebody needing to guard it, So it was kind of a, two stones, or two birds with a stone. But that sort of thing too, if you don't, if you may not be super equipped, but find something they can do and give them that responsibility, and you can watch them take pride in themselves, like the good kind of pride, and be able to grow. And the other thing I would mention too is kind of what I mentioned, like with a little flock, they had kind of a buddy system. If you have one person that's assigned to that child, they need to probably talk with the parent, kind of get the feel of what does and what doesn't work. But if you have one person that's assigned to that child, or maybe 2 maximum, that is a great way to kind of help. If you don't have like a special needs children's church or children's class, that is a great way to integrate your child into a group with everyone else, and not have to feel like they're just separated.
Good. That's good.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Yeah, excellent. And do you have something?
Yeah. So in our area, there's a church that's partnered with the Ability Tree. Are you familiar with that?
I don't think I've heard of it.
So it's a husband and wife that started this initiative, or this program, because their son is special needs, and churches were not equipped for what he needed. And so it's an organization that will go into a church and help you figure out, where do you need stairs, or where do you need a ramp, or let's get you all trained so that you can provide that respite care, and provide these nights like you were talking about, where you and your wife could go out on a date and leave your child for a couple of hours, and these people are trained. And so just really helping more churches become aware and figure out what to do for these families to serve them. So yeah, it's pretty cool that churches have something that they can turn to.
Right.
And so, maybe our listeners can look in their area and see if there are churches that have partnered with something like that maybe they're ready to accept that child and accept that family and give them what they need to serve them.
Right. Yeah. So like I said, I wasn't familiar with that one in particular, but I know within our denomination, we have some people, at least at the state level, who are like, that is their whole thing, that their education and everything. It is all, they're all about, whatever the special needs could be, whether it's health, mobility, cognitive, developmental, whatever it is. And so they've been a really great resource to be able to kind of help figure out what we can do. And yeah, so again, if a church can be able to build a program, or even if it's a couple of churches together saying, hey, we're going to reach out there. And that one thing I liked about Little Flock is you did not even have to be a member of the church. You didn't have to be a Christian. They didn't care. They were just doing that as a complete ministry service.
Just serving.
The information is a little old, but the last time I looked, probably one of the largest unchurched people group in the U.S. are special needs families. I forget the number. It's probably 90% plus families, even if they're Christians, that they don't go. And sometimes it's the stress, or it's just, they might, feel like they can go. So for a while, again, me working at the church, being on staff or serving one or another, can't just disappear in the middle of service too easily. Again, my church is very understanding. So my wife would sometimes, come late after worship because of the music might overstimulate my child, or they would, be there for 20 minutes and then he's crying, and then, and he leaves, or my wife and my son would leave. And again, the church again is very understanding. But at one point, my wife was commenting that it's just so stressful and the pastor, he told it to her side, but also on the stage, he said, look, if he's like, I've got a microphone and we got speakers, I can talk over a crying baby. And if someone gives you, a stink eye or says anything, you just send them to me. Like, I'm not going to have somebody not be at the church just because they got a crying child. Awesome. And so that was very good. And that let us know that he was in our corner as well. But again, there's so many who just, for one reason or another, they don't go. Maybe it is the pain, of the grief of how they're trying to sort through this and how can God be good, and having those questions. And maybe it is because maybe you can only manage 20 minutes, at church. And my encouragement would say, go with those 20 minutes. I know it's stressful. I know it's hard, and maybe sometimes you can't do it. And perhaps, talk with somebody, the pastor or somebody at the church, and say, hey, this is our situation. We want to be a part of it, but we might only be able to be a little bit at a time. And so usually they can be helpful there too. But the isolation, families can become an island way too easy. And I've seen it happen. And they just kind of block out the rest of the world. Because we tend to gravitate to what's smoother and easier. But that, I would say, if you know someone who's special needs or a family with special needs children, do everything you can to include them. And like we said with our friends at church, because, the typical thing was after church on Sunday, we were going out to eat. And whether it was our son was having a bad day or we just had no money to do it, we're like, please keep inviting us, because one day we're going to say yes, and it's going to be great. And it might be 2 or 3 times a year, but we want to say yes, but please keep inviting us. And even our friends at church have been pretty good, but just because someone says no 100 times, just keep asking for the most part, or at least say, hey, the invitation's always open. I don't want to harass you with it. You gotta have that conversation. But yeah,
I like that you mentioned that. Just if you're the family that has that child, I like that, you're encouraging them to say, hey, just speak up for themselves, to be your own advocate and say, don't give up on me, That's a good word for anybody who's in the situation. And and
you're gonna have to advocate for your child medically anyway.
Yeah.
Do it spiritually and, socially as well.
That's such a good point.
Don't drop it off just because it's not medically prescribed to go to church,
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, that was great. I appreciate you bringing some light to that, because there probably are some people listening or watching that, again, maybe don't have special needs children like us, but, we certainly want to be more aware of those that do. And like you said, it really helps us realize that, hey, we shouldn't get our feelings hurt because someone like you might say no, 10 times. It's just the nature of what you're going through, and that, for us to continue to keep trying and keep reaching out, and then it would help people like you, know that, hey, I got somebody that, in my corner that cares about us, and that we can go to if we need to. So, yeah. Well, I think this has been awesome. I feel like this is probably a good place to start to wind it down.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate, it's like, as a husband and wife, be intentional to stay connected, to talk to each other about decisions that you have to make. Be intentional with your children, your other children, and spending time with them and letting them know how important they are, and advocate for yourself and what you need in those moments, and find those resources and use them. So those are some really good points that you made, and just knowing that God got you in this and he's there with you. Like, that's huge. Yeah. It's really appreciate all that.
And with that, Brandon, are there any resources or anything that might be helpful for our audience? And then also, if you have ways to stay in touch with you, feel free to mention that.
Sure. As far as resources, I mentioned some of them. Again, if you can be mature about it, search on social media, reach out to churches. If you have a university in your area too, they might have some good resources, especially if they do medical or teaching. Usually there are some special or specific tracks for special needs. That's probably another interesting place to check out. And, however you feel about public schools, again, that's another one where they might be able to have some sort of connection and resources, but kind of building these connections is a really big way. There's another thing I want to mention. There's a camp in Southern Kentucky. It's near Bowling Green. It's in Scottsville, Kentucky. It's called Center for Courageous Kids. They are absolutely phenomenal. We've volunteered there a few times after finding them, my youth group has. And their goal is basically to give that full-on camp experience to kids who have the whole spectrum of special needs. And they have thought about everything. Like, one of the ones, it's so simple, but you think about mini golf. Have you ever seen a mini golf course that is compatible for wheelchairs?
No.
And I have it, but they built one. And they do it completely free. And they have certain weeks that are specific for, again, whether it's cancer or diabetes or autism or, everything you can imagine. They got a full medical facility on site. And they love when they have new campers. It's just, again, with that isolation, it can be very difficult. And so, Center for Courageous Kids is a fantastic place to definitely,
Oh, that's
definitely worth checking out.
Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
and yeah, as far as connecting with me, of course, like you mentioned, I have the Charting Life podcast. Um, the Facebook would probably be the easiest way to communicate back and forth,
Okay.
Charting Life podcast, or you can email me at chartinglifepodcast@gmail.com. And I've got all the places where it's, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, and YouTube as well. So
Will all that be in the show
Yeah,
notes?
we'll put some
Okay.
links to all of what you mentioned on the show notes. So
Good.
don't worry if you're watching or listening and you're not catching all this. So
yeah.
Okay.
Well, with that, this has been great. Thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us. I know that our audience is going to get a lot out of what you've had to say. I mean, you've educated us a lot as well. So I think with that, we will go ahead and sign off. And thanks so much for watching. And we will see you next time. Take care.